Have a think back over the past 10 years of the space game genre. It's changed dramatically, right? I mean, for the most part, it's become more of what we want, and I think that's fair to say. We've got more ships, better planets, bigger galaxies, we have ships that we can walk inside of, and stations we can build, and so much more. The issue, if there is one, is that not all of the games do all of these things well. But this video isn't about that. What we're talking about today is the 10-year club. I mean, think about it. What are the things that you've wanted from space games over the years, and which game delivered on those things? I'd be willing to bet that the vast majority of the titles that actually delivered are at least 10 years old, and what's more, one game entered that 10-year club just this week. So for me, there are 6 games that fit this category. For you, there might be others, so let me know about them in the comments below. Here's a bunch of the games then that, in my opinion, completely changed the genre in a way they didn't return from. Starting with all the way back in 1984, where I was just 8 years old, and back then a space game meant a screen full of shapes and a high score, just aliens and whatnot falling down from the top of the sky, or you shooting asteroids, things such as that. You'd survive waves of this and ultimately you'd die and then start again, and your goal was to get a high score. Space N was a place where we did these things, and often it was just a single screen that happened to contain enemies. But then everything changed with the arrival of Elite. Now Elite put you inside the seat of the ship. That in itself was of course a big deal, to actually pilot a game from first person, and what's more, it did this in 3 dimensions, something that hadn't really been done before in any serious way. The game was created by David Braben and Ian Bell, and they filled the game with 8 galaxies and over 2,000 planets. And each of these had an economy, a government, a tech level, and much more. Your goal was very broad: buy low, sell high, upgrade the ship, take a risk on rougher systems, and perhaps for a better margin, and explore the galaxy. The game world was your playground, and this was a massive shift for the space game genre. Perhaps it was a massive shift for gaming as a whole. So a move away from collecting points towards, I guess we could say, collecting capability and or money and other such things. And the whole concept of Elite continued to evolve. Eventually we got Frontier Elite 2, and it was bigger, it was bolder, and it was all round much better, and generally more of the same idea, all of course in a very good way. And the idea of evolution and things improving over time is actually very relevant to the sponsor of today's video, Exter. Travelling or just getting through a normal week, the same things come with me, and the fastest way to ruin the day is not knowing where one of those things is. That's why I use Exter's new tracker card and tracker tag. Small Bluetooth trackers, they put your things on a map on your phone, and they work with both Apple Find My and Google Find Hub. Either phone, no subscription, no extra app. The card is 1.8mm, so it vanishes into a wallet, much like Exter's own high-quality wallets. The card is also rated IP68 and has wireless charging that lasts 10 months. The tag meanwhile has a replaceable battery as well as an attachment holder, so it can go with your keys, luggage, even a bike or a camera bag. Both tags ring at 95 decibels, allowing you to easily locate them. You can see them on a global map when it's further away, or you can even get an alert before you walk off without it. Exter's 10th anniversary sale is now on with up to 40% off. Use my code ObsidianAnt26 at the link below for an extra 20% off on top of the web sales. That's up to 60% off in total. Do check out the links for everything you need to know. Now, the 90s of course were the era of Frontier Elite 2, but also the era of the cinematic space experience, Wing Commander, Freelancer, the X-Wing series. These all shifted what it meant to be a space game in huge ways, and their impact cannot be understated. Now this segment I'm going to leave relatively light here. Chris Roberts of course is a big name, and I want to visit this in a future video, so we're going to kind of go past this and move on to the next big thing, which is the X series. So Elite gave us an economy in the space game genre, and it was a very simple economy in many ways, essentially a table with a list of prices. Nothing in the game was actually being made. No ships were being flied between those planets carrying goods that we were about to buy, and the numbers existed because the game pretty much set what they were going to be. But then in 1999, a small German studio decided the economy inside a space game should be real. Enter X Beyond the Frontier. Here, factories consume raw materials and produce goods. NPC traders physically fly them between stations. prices move because supply and demand actually change, and every ship and every weapon, every station in that universe was manufactured by someone from something. And that very much changed everything about the game, everything about the genre in many ways. Blew up a freighter, for example, and the station it was supplying starts running short, and the price of whatever goods that station was making would go up. And interestingly, nothing about that needed you as a player. It would all happen in the background. So conceptually, it's a quite simple step. Let the galaxy live and breathe. But in execution, it's very complex, especially for 1999. And what it meant is that the galaxy stopped just being a place that you would fly through, and instead it became something far more. A living, breathing universe with real supply and real demand, and NPCs flying around doing their own thing. 27 years later, Egosoft is still building that same universe we see it today with the X4 Foundations, and Egosoft have never actually made anything else. And here's the thing, each time these space games made these big steps, Elite going 3D and open world, X with its living universe, it's pushed the entire genre forwards, and it changed the very idea of what a space game or space sim even meant. Now, 4 years after the launch of X Beyond the Frontier, we saw another big step for the genre. So up until this point, every space game had every space game that had mattered was authored. In other words, it was there because one way or another the developer put it there. And whilst X certainly had a living economy and things were kind of influenced by the player, EVE Online went somewhere quite different. It gave the whole universe to the players. So in EVE Online, the ships are built by players, the ore that the ships are constructed from is mined by the players, and then it's sold on markets that are set and controlled by the players. In addition to that, there's a whole load of territory. All of this is held by player organisations, and that territory can even change hands when someone else takes it. And this, of course, meant that EVE Online very quickly became the first space game with a real history. And by this, I'm not talking about lore, I'm talking about actual real history created by the player base. It's a place where things could happen, and events that would occur which nobody really planned because they were dynamic, caused by players. And that's why today we see talk of wars in EVE Online that people still tell you about. There's betrayals that we shouldn't really forget, and all of these are the spice of what makes EVE, EVE. And all of this was layered on top of one very harsh design decision. It meant that you could lose things permanently. A ship that you might have spent months saving for could be destroyed in moments, and that's what gives every story and every event in EVE a very real weight, because before EVE, space games existed in a save file on your PC. You could reload at any moment, and you're always alone in the game, a single player. But EVE put you among thousands of other players, and then made that have a consequence. Now, after 2003, things went into decline for the space game genre, and that's a story I'm going to recount another time. But for years, space games all but disappeared. A few were kept it alive, notably EVE Online and the X series. But elsewhere, no one was touching them, and perhaps much of this was due to the scope of the games themselves. Space games, after all, by their very nature, are big, and publishers don't want to fund big games if there isn't a guaranteed return. But then in 2012, enter Chris Roberts, returning from the earlier days of his gaming creation. He put the genre on the map with Wing Commander and Freelancer, and then in 2012 he asked the audience directly for funding for a new space game, and they gave him eventually over $1 billion for a pair of games, Star Citizen and Squadron 42. 14 years later, there's still no finished game. Squadron 42 should make an appearance in 2026, and Star Citizen has been around in a form of early access for years at this point. But here's the story, there isn't actually a finished game, and a lot of people are understandably annoyed about that. However, all of this has proved something very specific. $1 billion of funding, that's enormous by any measurement, and it shows the demand for huge space games is real and it's massive. And there's actually something I find very interesting about that. Nobody else, no other company, went after this idea. 14 years later, and a proven $1 billion demand, and no major publisher has attempted a revival or attempted this same big everything game. Sure, we have Elite, but I personally feel that is in a different category of game, and we could perhaps make the argument that Starfield tried something like this as well, but again, that is a single player game and an entirely different category. So why no huge multiplayer everything space game like Star Citizen other than, well, Star Citizen itself? It suggests to me, maybe, that publishers concluded the dream of this isn't just an expensive one, but it's perhaps a bit too big. That's not to say that Star Citizen and Squadron 42 won't be a success though, because with this amount of backing behind them and the fact they're still going, and with that Squadron 42 launching very soon, there's a very real chance we could see some form of success from this game very soon indeed. And by success in this context, I mean a product released in everybody's hand. And let's look at it another way. With $1 billion funding from people who are interested in backing this game, it suggests that there might be an even bigger audience out there for people who haven't yet tried it. Now, Chris Roberts wasn't the only person to return to the genre. The man who invented the genre in many regards also couldn't get anyone to fund a sequel to Elite. And that's why Elite Dangerous went to Kickstarter. It became the most successful British crowdfunding project of its time and shipped then in December 2014. And it actually found a large audience that has, for the most part, remained with it for the entire duration. And that then turned for the idea of nobody wants space games into a demonstrably false statement, because obviously people very much do want space games. Now, Elite Dangerous ran with the conventions that Elite itself had created, but it then bolted on the conventions that other games that had pushed the genre forward, such as a multiplayer world that we'd seen in EVE Online and other such games, and of course the economy that we'd see in X Beyond the Frontier and the other X franchise series. Now, whilst the Elite economy wasn't fully simulated in quite the same sense as X, it nonetheless was very real for the people involved with it. And then Elite went even further. It simulated a full one-to-one scale galaxy. I think it's fair to say then that Elite has had one of the largest impacts on the modern space gamer genre of any title. It's literally a genre-defining game for many different reasons. And perhaps more than anything else, it really pushed the idea of huge planets, a massive galaxy, and realism before anything else. All these games then I've discussed today have moved the genre forwards in a big way, and there's a clear before and after moment. And it's actually true to say that the space sim category was fundamentally changed by each of these games, and that brings us to the newest member of the 10-year club, No Man's Sky, which turned 10 just a few days ago, and its contribution to the genre is so massive that it impacted all of gaming as well. So at this point, everyone knows the launch story. It shipped way too short of its promises, people were furious, and what happened next was quite unexpected. We've had roughly 40 major updates, all free, on a game people paid for just once all the way back in 2016. And here's the thing, Hello Games didn't just add content to the game. Instead, they started inserting whole new genres. We've got base building with electricity and logic gates, settlements that you can govern. We've got mechs, underwater bases, VR, living ships, paleontology, where you dig up alien bones and build museum exhibits, and this year, a full turn-based creature battling system, much like Pokemon. In fact, No Man's Sky is something that's not got a real equivalent anywhere else. It's rebuilt its entire universe several times over, planets regenerated, mountains bigger, players logging in to find that their base is now underwater because the ground had changed. And you know what? We can point to other games outside the space genre, Minecraft, Warcraft, Mountain Blade, a whole ton of other impressive titles. And then we can look at inside the genre as well, and we've got Elite Dangerous, which grew a lot over time. X4 has also grown. EVE has been growing for 23 years. But each of these titles that I've mentioned grew into better versions of themselves. No Man's Sky, on the other hand, is arguably the only one where the game is barely recognisable as the same object that it started out as. Not because it looks dramatically different, what it does is much improved, but also because there's just so much added to it. And for me, this tells us a very specific story about No Man's Sky. Where the other 5 titles that I've mentioned defined what a space game could be, No Man's Sky has proved that a space game never really has to settle on what it wants to be, that it can become something so much more. And maybe over time this is something we'll see influence both games within the space game genre as well as elsewhere as well. So that, in my opinion, is a part of the story of the space game genre, and how the titles that have existed for 10 years or more have really influenced the entire genre in very notable ways. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you. My thanks again to Exter for sponsoring this video. Do check out the links in the video description. Do take care, and I'll catch you next time.